Hi, this is Teachers Talking Teaching, and I'm Tracy Bean, classroom teacher, and we're here for another week to talk about everything that's amazing and wonderful about being a teacher. I'm also here with another Tracy, Tracy Gile.
Hi, thanks, Tracy. Nice to see you again. I'm excited to talk about teaching again this week. We've had another full week of work, and you got to go to a conference, and I was busy doing some after-school meetings and lots of things on my job. But one of the things we wanted to start with this time is talking about teaching during a pandemic. And that last month, Forbes came out with a statistic that 48% of teachers were considering leaving their job in the last 30 days. And another 34% were going to leave the profession entirely. So there's been a lot in the news lately about how difficult it is to be a teacher and how many teachers are leaving the profession. And teaching has never been like an easy job for anyone. So teaching during a pandemic certainly made things different, challenging in some ways, but also we innovated during teaching in a pandemic. And so one of the things we wanted to start off today was talking about there were things that we maybe treasured about teaching in a pandemic that we would take away from teaching in a pandemic, and things that we would never want to do again, that we would toss. So what are your treasure, take, and toss from teaching in a pandemic?
Oh, gosh, my treasure would probably be, first on a personal note, my oldest was at college, and so it was a treat to get them home for an extended amount of time that you don't usually get again once kids leave for college. Maybe they're home for the summer, but that's the most. So on a personal note, that was a good thing. Whether they thought that was a good thing or not might be debatable. But as far as a teacher goes, my treasure is I was really stressed going into, especially last year, because we started the year remote, about how do you build relationships with kids, because I feel like that is certainly the key to teaching. It's the key to my teaching for sure in my classroom and being successful, and motivating kids. Like I feel like if you have a relationship, you've got motivation somewhat built in. And so during the fall, I was really worried going into the school year that wasn't going to be as possible to build relationships. And it turned out to be the opposite of that, because I am going to value the relationships I built with the kids last year maybe more than any class ever before. In fact, those kids are the kids that have come back. You always have kids who come back to visit in the years past, but so many of them have shown up at my outside door this year and want to catch up. And so the fact that you can build relationships no matter what the setting is, I think is a huge thing to treasure. My take, first of all, I had an amazing team last year that I relied on. And so just taking away from that, the importance of a strong team is a big piece, but also the technology that we learned. Yes, we learned Zoom and Teams and all of those, but even just the reliance on Google Classroom and kind of digitizing a lot of things that weren't digital, that I wasn't teaching in a digital way before. And a lot of that then I've been able to use again this year. And I feel like it's kind of a better way of learning, using more Pear Deck, using some of those more engaging ways of
especially with your fifth graders. I mean, they, are so independent with the tools. They pick them up really fast.
So true. So yeah, that would be my take. And my toss would be hybrid learning. That I weirdly, like when you say we did, because in our district, we did remote, we did hybrid, and we did in person last year. We had a mix of all. And the hybrid was the hardest. And I didn't think that would be the case. I thought having at least some kids in front of me would be good. But then your attention was just torn between both. And we didn't even really try at my school to teach both the kids at home and the kids in front of us. We really just tried to give, while they were in front of us, we double taught math that day and sent them home with work and, a whole list of, here's your to-do list for tomorrow while you're at home. But it was still hard. I was getting emails from those families and those kids because they didn't understand something, needed help. And then the kids that were in front of me, we were trying to give them as much attention as you could on the days they were there. So that would be my toss, hybrid learning.
Yeah, that schedule is really hard to have any continuity with the kids, too, for them to figure out what was a school day, what was an at-home day. It's really tough on the little ones, too.
Fifth graders at least are somewhat independent, so you can give them a checklist. I can't imagine trying to do kindergarten. I feel like I said this last time, too, about kindergarten, but kindergarten exceptionally hard, I would think, during a pandemic because they are not really independent.
Right. Yeah, it took a lot of adult support.
Yeah. Thank God for parents, really.
Right.
So,
yeah.
What was your treasure toss and take as an administrator during the pandemic?
Yeah. So I was an elementary school principal during the pandemic last year, and my treasure was just the amazing staff that I had. That we changed. The favorite word was pivot. Pivot. We're going to change this. We're going to do this. And with every pivot, just a really great attitude of, we're in this together. We realize we have to make a change. We realize we have to be flexible. We realize we have to, do this differently. And it was hard, but everybody just had such a great attitude and very much came from a place of yes, we're going to do this. Yes, we're going to try this. We don't know what might happen, but we're just all in because, we're all in it for the kids. I mean, you go into teaching because you're all in it for the kids. And so you make those moves where you see you have to make those moves. And so I just really treasured the overall attitude of the staff in working together and finding a different way to do things. So my take from the year of pandemic teaching was really the relationships with families. I cannot imagine going through what we did without them and being so dependent on them. And particularly the little ones, they really had to be our co-teachers right next to the teacher and navigating things at home and
tech experts.
Oh my gosh. And the tech
they had to deal with their kids' computer issues.
My gosh. I had this lovely grandma who took on her grandkids in Tennessee. So they moved from Colorado, where we are, and lived with grandma in Tennessee so grandma could help the kids with schooling. And so every morning she would call me and say, okay, I'm trying to get them on. Am I doing this right? And so I'd walk her through how to get the kids into their morning meeting and, just develop this relationship with this grandma that I'd never met before so that we could get her kids access to school those days. And just her resiliency to do that, our parents' resiliency to do that. So the pandemic was tough on the parents too. And they just really became co-teachers in a lot of ways, in a way that I never think that we have engaged them before. And it just really made me think we could do more with that parent-teacher relationship.
You mentioned grandparents too, and the number of kids that I had when I did parent-teacher conferences last year, that we actually had them with parents and grandparents, because the grandparents were the day-to-day.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, I was like, this is a new thing, to involve, it's a whole family.
Right.
Conference.
Yeah, and there were so many people invested in kids doing their best and trying to find access for their kids. So that's something that I really have thought a lot about, how we can keep that family relationship going in years to come and what it could look like. I think there's so much potential there that we could do things a lot differently in what we learned through the pandemic. So you mentioned hybrid teaching, and that would be what you would toss. I would toss the 15 different schedules that I made last year for all the iterations of school that we had. We started the year in remote, but we thought we were going to be in hybrid about 2 weeks before that. So we had a hybrid schedule, and then we quickly pivoted to a remote schedule. And then about 6 weeks into the school year, we went to hybrid, and the first hybrid schedule that I made really didn't work for, now the new hybrid moment that we were in. And so we made a new schedule for hybrid. And with any schedule, once you work through it for a few days, you realize something has to change. It's not working. And so probably made 2 or 3 different hybrid versions. Then we were in hybrid for maybe 6 weeks. Then we went to remote again for about another 6 weeks. And so we made a new remote schedule because then we opened remote learning centers for kids who are at risk to come in. So we had a schedule for that. And then we finally came back to in-person learning, but we had to create this maximum amount of distance when kids were eating. So lunch was just spread in classrooms, and then trying to figure out coverage for all of the classrooms for lunch. And so there were several schedules for that. And I probably had the best lunch. I think I had first grade and supervised their lunch and recess last year. And I just loved spending time with those kids. And they were silly and goofy and just enjoyed being back together with each other. And it was probably one of the highlights of my day, is doing that lunch and recess duty with them. They had such a good time being back together. But I would never had a year where I made that many schedules for the school.
Yeah, we had a bus driver actually that came into our building because our district was amazing at trying to employ and keep money flowing for a lot of those people that weren't as needed as they normally are. And she came in because you know how many adults it took to cover lunches alone. And she came in and actually covered my class during lunch every day. And my kids fell in love with her and developed such a great relationship with her, that was kind of a cool thing that came out of the pandemic too, was an opportunity for some of the classes to get to know an adult that maybe they wouldn't have had a chance to really interact with a whole lot. So there was some good things that came out of it.
Yeah, a lot of special relationships with people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what's popping in your world this week?
So this week, I had a chance to go to a reading conference in the big one for our state, and meet a lot of amazing authors. I got to go to a lunch and meet Gordon Corman, who's wrote like Restart, Loser, Ungifted, all sorts of books. In fact, he just published his 99th book.
Oh my
gosh.
Crazy.
Wow. So meeting authors like that was pretty cool. And this year's Caldecott winner for Watercress is her book, Andrea Wang, or Andrea Wong. Not sure how to say her name for sure, but so she was there. And then I got to meet other fellow educators like Pernille Rip and Colby Sharp, who are more like Minnesota, Wisconsin teachers, but they're in the trenches too. And to have a chance, I actually got to talk to both of them and just kind of be inspired by what's going on in their classrooms and things they're doing to inspire kids to be readers. So that was a great, bucket filling activity this week, and a chance to sit back and question some of my practices, maybe spend some time reflecting on what kinds of things am I doing and could maybe change or make better. So last week we mentioned elevate. So how do I elevate my reading and writing instruction in the weeks to come? So how about what was popping in your world this week?
So this week I gave a presentation to our Board of Education along with 2 other administrators, and we talked about literacy review that our district is going to go through. And the literacy review, I'm excited about it. It's using a resource or a research study called the Opportunity Myth. And the Opportunity Myth was published by the New Teacher Project. And in the Opportunity Myth, they talk about how kids have big aspirations, for their future, their college and career. And what the New Teacher Project found is that the level of instruction and tasks that kids were getting in their classrooms weren't preparing them necessarily for the colleges and careers that they were aspiring to. And so the literacy review will take a look at a couple of different things in our classrooms, and they'll look at the level of critical thinking that is happening in the classroom and who's doing the thinking in the classroom. Is it the teacher that's doing the critical thinking, or is it the kids who are doing the critical thinking? That's a key component of preparing for life beyond, K-12 school is being able to process through things and think about different pieces of information and come up with new ideas. So they'll be looking at that aspect. They'll be looking at actual assignments, so some of the tasks, a sample of tasks that kids will receive and are expected to do, and whether those tasks align to the rigor of the standards. And then they'll look at just the overall engagement of the kids in the class with the literacy content, the text that they're reading. You talked about different texts that, your kids enjoy and that you enjoy reading. And so they'll look at things like that, like how involved in the overall culture of the class are kids, as well as, in what they're learning and understanding. So I think it'll be really interesting. One of the things that I know it can be really unnerving, because people think, gosh, I'm doing great work. I'm doing the best that I can. And so to have somebody come in and say, well, here's some other things that you might consider. My hope is that that's what we get out of this review is, an appreciation for what we're doing, but also, having a third person come in and say, like, have you thought about this? Like you talked about from the conference, questioning your practices and just leaving it as, we all have room to grow. We all have room for continuous improvement. I think that's one of the great things about teaching is you're never done. There's never the perfect lesson. There's always something to change, to add on to elevate.
Right. Like adding books to your classroom library, which I may have to keep secret from my husband, my list of books that I want to buy after this weekend, because, oh my gosh, talk about inspiring to go read.
Yes. And I think that's great, particularly that you're a reader. I love that you're such a reader of young adult books and children's books, because you know what to recommend to your kids. That makes an engaging classroom when your kids know that you've read the book that you're recommending to them.
Yeah. It kind of becomes a competition, too, for them to pull out a book and read it that I haven't read yet. So it's good motivation.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you have a very literature-rich classroom.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And your husband, he may or may not know that, but I'm sure he supports it.
He does. So, yeah. So how about your top tweet of the week? Did you want to share something from that?
Yeah, so I did retweet something. So I saw an article that was on NPR this week, and the article was about a research study that talked about how we've been doing preschool needs to look different. And it was fascinating because the study, very rarely in K-12 education do you get a true randomized study, because, we don't randomly select who comes into our classrooms. It's not like that. And so, to have a true scientific study that was randomized, it just happened to be that this particular couple of preschools, they had a true randomized selection into the preschools. And so then they studied a group of kids from preschool all the way, I think, through 6th grade to look at the effects of a particular preschool approach on their achievement. And the study found kind of went contrary to what we've seen in research about preschool programs, that typically what we hear is that if kids go to preschool programs, then those effects go far into their educational career in a positive way. So one of the interesting things about this study is the particular preschool approach actually ended up after 3rd grade, the kids had negative effects. I know, right? I thought the same thing, like negative effects of preschool, like that never happens. Like you never hear about that in research. But one of the things that they found, it was a particular design of this preschool, that the preschool that kids were randomly selected in was supposed to be this kind of rigorous preschool model. And so when it comes to, like, you think of rigor, what translated then was a lot of skill-based academic work in that preschool.
Like truly probably teaching the kids to read in preschool.
Yes. So that is what they're proposing, is that this negative effect resulted from that instructional design, that it's really better for preschoolers to have play and to have hands-on and to have lots of opportunities for the kids to talk, that this more rigorous preschool, there was way more teacher talk and less kid talk. And there was more, classroom type of work, like whole group instruction versus experiential, hands-on, field trips, and all of those things that you think of when you think of, maybe a preschool experience that you'd want your own child to go to. And the fact that it had negative effects, I think, was pretty shocking to people, because, a lot of, policymakers and legislators will say, well, we have to increase the rigor and that's how we get results. And this showed something different.
Interesting. So it kind of goes back to that idea that we all know in education that the pendulum swings. And so, is this kind of research going to make it swing again?
Right.
So,
right. I think one of the things, again, that we talked at the top of the podcast about the pandemic is, the pandemic taught us that kids need to be highly engaged in what they're learning, and they have to have relationships with the adults that they're learning from, and that those are really two key factors and their success and improving their outcomes. That yes, rigor is a part of it, and rigor to different tasks, but you can also do it in a super engaging way.
So my top tweet of the week was kind of a return to last week's, and I tweeted this week about so last week I mentioned that I introduced Wordle to my students, and
they wouldn't go to lunch.
They were so excited about it. And so Wordle's still a thing. Like, they're still pulling up their Wordle. And then my thing this week is to convince them that as soon as you find it, they're so excited when they figure out what it is, not to shout it out immediately, because there's only one.
Right.
So, there was a couple times this week where somebody shared as they got to school that they had already solved the Wordle. And even I was like, I didn't solve it yet today. So, but anyway, I had said I was going to introduce them to some that are similar to Wordle, but are math related. And so I threw a bunch of those in Google Classroom under the topic of puzzles to be solved. And there was about 4 or 5 of them. I put in Oodle, Nerdle, Mathler, and Mathler seemed to be the one that they settled on, that they kind of liked the best. And I would say it's the most like Wordle too, where it gives you a target number and you are trying to build the equation that would get you there, but usually you need more than one operation. So the great thing about that is here in a couple of weeks, we're going to get to topic 13, which is order of operations. Right. So it's like I'm kind of pre-teaching them what they're going to need down the road. But they were super excited about that. So now I got to find what's the next thing to energize them to do more math and language arts learning this week.
Engaging, always keeping it engaging.
Exactly. So
that's awesome. So how was the week on the chocolate barometer?
Oh, well, I would say that since I was gone for 2 days, of course, you know what it's like to be gone from teaching. It takes you as much time to prep for the sub. Right. You might as well just have shown up. But in this case, I had to be gone for the conference. So a lot of chocolate to get the sub plans written. I'm going to say it was a 10 chocolate week because every one of the vendors at the conference had chocolate. And so it's not that it was a bad week. It's that I ate way too much chocolate because every time you went to the ballroom. They know what
teachers like.
Every time you walked through the vendor's room, and it was in the hallway instead. So you had to go down the hallway. Oh, take a chocolate from this one and a chocolate from this one.
That's how they bring you into their table. Exactly. See the chocolate there.
So in reality, as far as barometer wise, it was probably really only like a 2 chocolate week because it wasn't too stressful since I was at the conference, but I did eat my fill of chocolate at the conference.
Nice. That's awesome.
How about you? What was your chocolate barometer level this week?
Oh, man. The week started out like lots of chocolate. Like if for Monday and Tuesday, it probably by that point was a 10, but then...
Or off the scale.
Yeah, off the scale by Monday and Tuesday. And then by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it had calmed down a little bit. So I'd probably say it was a 5 if I averaged the two,
Yeah.
It was like a 10 at the beginning of the week, and then it was a 1 later on in the week. So, about a 5. So not too bad, but, just as education is, it's kind of a wild roller coaster ride.
Ebbs and flows.
Absolutely. So, the roller coaster was riding fast at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, it slowed down a little bit.
You were just on the carousel by the end of the week.
Yeah. A little bit more mellow.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Thanks for joining us again this week on another episode of Teachers Talking Teaching. This is Tracy.
And this is Tracy. If you liked our podcast, please like or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us.